One of the most important parts of a website is the navigation. And it's one thing to define a very general navigation region, as we have in this set of wireframes. But at some point, we have to get more specific. We have to identify the particular navigation items we want to use for our site, and we want to go ahead and represent those sections as part of our wireframes and then ultimately as part of our fully designed page. So, using the 960 grid framework exclusively as a way to set up navigation, we have a couple options, but our options are going to be limited. Let's take a look at what we could do using 960, and then we'll look at an alternative that we can meld with the existing 960 structure that we have on this page. So as you can see, I have several different regions laid out here. Let's scroll down and you'll see that our sidebar and main content area extend down for a while, and then we hit the footer. But up toward the top, I have a navigation section here. Now let's say that I've thought through my content and my content types, and I've anticipated how users are going to and want to navigate through my site, move through the pages. And let's say I've come up with 6 different sections or items for my navigation. And for the purposes of this demo site, we'll say that those 6 sections are home, about, stories, photos, connections, and help. And of course, your sections are going to depend all on your content and your goals. How would we take those 6 sections, though, and represent them in these wireframes using the 960 grid? Well, here's a way we could do it. Let's go over to Vim and open up our HTML file here. And you'll see that we have a nav HTML5 element, a nav tag. Here it is. And inside of that nav tag, we have the word navigation, and it's inside of a p tag. Back in Firefox, here it is, navigation, inside of that p tag. And back in Vim, as we assess the different classes that we've added to the nav tag, we see we've given it a weight of 3. Grid underscore 12, it's going to span the entire width of the site. And we've set the height, and we've also applied some margins to the top and bottom to create the spacing. Okay, let's go ahead and add a line here. And we're going to, within this nav tag, add in section tags, one for each of the elements in our navigation. Now, each of these section tags is going to span 2 columns because I have 6 navigation elements that I listed. If they span 2 columns apiece, then that'll get me to my full 12 columns. So I'm going to say the grid is 2 for this, and I'm going to say the weight is, well, let's see, weight 3 and weight 4. So in this case, my higher numbers represent stronger, more important weights. So let's make this a weight of 4. And we'll set the grid to 2. We won't do anything else just yet. Let me add in the text, and I'll put it in a p tag again. So my first item I mentioned was going to be home. We can come in here now and delete this line. We don't need that. And I'm going to copy that line. We'll paste in here once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Delete that line. And then we can come in and delete the entire word and replace it. So our second section was about. We'll come down, delete the word, and add in stories. Come down. And next we have photos. After that, we're doing connections. And we have help. And let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's it. I actually created one extra row here. So let's delete that line. Save the file and come back to Firefox, refresh the page. Okay, so there we have home, about, stories, photos, connections, and help. Now, Something isn't quite right. You'll notice, obviously, that help is not fitting. Reason being that I have unwanted margins on my first and last elements. So home is given a 10 pixel rather margin on the left. Help has a 10 pixel margin on the right. We want to knock both of those out. And remember, to do that, we can use the special alpha and omega classes provided by the 960 framework. So we'll come into our first element here and add in the class name alpha. We'll come down several lines, come back, and insert the word omega for that class. Okay, remember, alpha and omega get applied to the first and last regions when they're inside of another region, as we're dealing with here. Okay, so there we go. We've created 6 different regions, and each of those regions is holding one of the items in our navigation. Now, we happen to make each of those regions 2 columns wide, and so the end effect was navigation that spans clear across the width of the site. We could also come back to our layout here and change grid _2 to grid _1. Let's go through and make that update. Save the file and refresh it. Okay, so now we're spanning just the 1 column. A problem we run into when we do that, though, is if we have a label which is too long, as we do here, you'll see it simply doesn't fit inside of the section there. Now, we could come in and manually add a dash to try to make this word go across 2 lines, basically wrap the text, but even then it's really not going to fit very well. And that takes us to the problem with using the 960 framework to lay out this navigation. We can do 2 columns, we can do 1 column, we can't do a half column, and we can't do 1.5 columns. And so we're boxed into just a couple of different ways of laying out this navigation. Well, a lot of time we want more flexibility than that. And most of the time, we want each of our navigation elements to be however wide it needs to be to fit the text for that particular element. In other words, we don't want photos and connections to be the same width. We want photos to be as long as it needs to be, and connections to be a bit longer or wider to fit that particular label. And we want that width to be dependent on whatever the label is that we've assigned to that item. Well, fortunately, we do have a way to do this. And there's a way to do it within the context of the 960 framework. So we're going to keep everything else in 960, including the container nav element we've set up here. But rather than relying on 960 for each of these 6 sections, we're going to use a different technique. And this is a very popular way to create navigations for websites. So we're going to go through it in 2 parts. First, we're going to set up the necessary HTML, and you're going to see it's pretty straightforward. And then we're going to see what CSS we need to add to the mix to get that HTML markup looking the way we want. And we're going to assume that we're looking for this sort of horizontal navigation where each of the items appears side by side. Okay, let's get to it. We'll go back into Vim. And we're going to go ahead and just clear out everything we've done so far. We'll delete all that content. We don't need it. And we'll get rid of these extra spaces here and add in a new line for ourselves. Okay, and we're ready to go. So the way to add navigation is to use an unordered list. An unordered list is going to be our outer element, and then we're going to use the LI tags, the list item tags, for each of the items in our navigation. Within the LI tags, we're going to put A tags, and we do that because we want our navigation to be linked up. We want to be able to click on those items and go to those sections. And that's it in terms of the HTML structure. Of course, within the A tags, we're going to put whatever our actual labels are for our navigation. And all of this is going to go inside of our nav container elements because it's all part of the site navigation. So we begin with our opening UL tag. Nothing else we need to define there. So we're going to come in and add our first LI tag. Now, Once the li is in place, that opening li tag, we add our opening a tag. I'm going to add an href. Now, I'm not sure just yet what I want the href to be set to. And so a good convention when that's the case is to set it to the pound sign or a hashtag. And that's kind of like a placeholder until we figure out what we need that h tag, that href value within the h tag to be. So we'll close that out, and then we'll add the label for the first element, which is going to be home. Close the a tag, close the li tag. And that's it. So now we're going to repeat this process for each of the following lines. We'll copy that line, paste it into place twice, 3, 4, 5 times, and one more, 6. Okay. Yep, that's 7. I thought I did it one too many times. Okay, there's 6. And now we just update our navigation text for each item here. So we'll delete home on the second one, and we'll just go through and quickly add in each of the rest here. Okay. Final thing we have to do is close out that UL tag. We don't want to forget that. Okay, and our nav tag is already closed, so we're good on that front. Let's save this and head over to Firefox. Okay, so at this particular juncture, things are probably looking worse rather than better. We have an unordered list, sure enough, but the items are stacked. It's spilling outside of the height that I've defined for this navigation element, and it just doesn't look very good. Well, that of course is because I haven't applied some necessary CSS to the mix. Once we do that, things are going to be looking a lot better. So let's go back to Vim and we'll apply some of that necessary CSS.